ครับ Okay, I think people who are here already know about
Oh,
our
hello.
subject and who. Okay,
Yes. Oh, yes. We introduced him
in early stage.
earlier.
Okay, so I would not to take your time. So me let warm welcome คุณ
Charles.
Charles.
Good morning. So I'll quickly introduce myself because I think my title is a bit misleading. So officially, I'm a university lecturer, but I've been working in software for about 20 years, and I've been studying Agile for the last 10 years or so. I'm still active in the software community. I've been working at Naresuan for the last 5 years, but during that time I continue to build software and I continue to work with teams and learn more about Agile. So my topic today is product increment versus prototype. I'm going to start with a couple of disclaimers about my topic. Most of my experience comes from small teams and Scrum-ish teams. So I could well be making some horrible blunders when I talk about it. I encourage you to come and talk to me later today. Tell me how your teams work. I'm very interested in learning from your experience. Secondly, I'm not a UX expert. My background is very much software development. So I'm a developer, not a designer. I do have to do some design work, but you probably know more than me about UX, and that's not going to stop me talking about it today. But again, if I say something horribly wrong, please call me up on it, and please tell me how you do it, educate me. And lastly, this is a slightly strange reason to pick a topic, but the reason I chose this topic today is because I don't understand it. It's something that I feel doesn't make sense. So I wanted to bring it up here, talk to you guys, learn more about it, create a discussion about it. So let's get on to the talk. So this graphic was really the motivation for my talk today. I'm sure many of you have seen something like this before. This is an attempt to push together various concepts: design thinking, lean startup, agile. These concepts are all relevant to our jobs. They're all things that we should be interested in. And we all have to struggle with how do they fit together? How do they integrate? And this was really my motivation, because I look at this and I think that cannot be right. This cannot be how Agile is supposed to work. So I'll come back to this later on in the talk, but just so you know where I'm coming from. So chapter 1, learning is key. A quick introduction, make sure that you're all on the same page, understand where I'm coming from. I assume that your goal in your companies is to be successful, and I assume that your goal is thus to create value for your companies. So your end goal is to either produce something valuable, a product or a service, or to support the teams that are creating value. So increasing the efficiency of other teams. In a sense, you're either creating an external product or an internal product. I hope none of you disagree so far. To create value for your company, you need to first know what product you need to build. You then need to build it. You need to release it. And the value of the product needs to be greater than the cost that you've expended to create that product. So a key point here within the scope of Agile is that typically in modern companies, in creative industries, we don't know at the start of the project what we need to build. So this knowledge is a key aspect of Agile. If you're in the lucky position that you start a project and you know everything, you know what to build and how to build it, you probably shouldn't be at this conference. You probably shouldn't be studying Agile or applying Agile. So this is the key problem that Agile solves. Usually when we think about Agile, we think about learning what the market needs are, designing a product vision, trying to assess, does this product meet the needs of our market? Have we built a usable product, a valuable product? So this is the problem that Agile was designed to solve. This is, I think, what everyone thinks about when they hear Agile or when they hear about Scrum. So key idea from the Agile Manifesto, simplicity, maximizing the amount of work not done. So don't waste effort on non-valuable work. Another concept from the Agile Manifesto, we want to be ready to adapt to changing requirements. This is quite a vague statement in the manifesto. In my experience, the biggest cause for changing requirements is gaining knowledge. So the biggest reason that our direction changes is because we learn something. We learn something new about the market. We learn something new about how to design our product, how to make our product better, more usable. Or we learn that we've built the wrong product and the market didn't need what we built for them. So supporting our end goal of creating value is an intermediate goal of learning. It's my opinion that this is the core of Agile. So the core of Agile is continuous learning, continuous improvement, taking small steps and each step learning. I think probably so far you're all on the same page. I hope that this is not alien to anyone. But I want to set up the talk first. So today's talk is about learning. It's about two ways to learn. It's about prototyping and it's about product increments. So to summarize, feedback learning accelerates product development. The faster you learn, the earlier you learn, the more opportunity to learn and increase pace and to improve your direction. So chapter 2, prototyping is learning. I don't think anyone will be surprised by that. You can probably see the direction I'm going with this. I'm going to take quite a broad definition of prototyping today. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to include any work that is not complete, which has the purpose of learning something, of gaining knowledge. So for today, I'm going to include mockups, paper prototypes, partial products, and so on. So why do we prototype? We prototype because it's faster than developing the real product. I think everyone can agree with that. The goal is to get feedback quickly, to get feedback faster than building the product. So we make a quick prototype, we show it to our product owner, we show it to our customer, perhaps we show it on a market research, and we learn from it. So far so good, right? Agile wants learning. Learning will help us be faster, will create value for the company, and prototyping gives us that learning. So Agile should like prototyping, right? So here's another quote. Our first priority is rapid feedback through early delivery of simulations. The more astute of you will notice that this is not a real quote from the Agile Manifesto. This is where we take a bit of a twist in the talk. So plot twist, chapter 3, prototyping is not Agile. I have to put an asterisk there because I think that's a little bit of a strong statement to make. But I'm going to argue today that prototyping is actually in conflict with the core of Agile. So quoting from the real Agile manifesto, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable product. Again from the manifesto, deliver working product. Again, working product is the primary measure of progress. From the Scrum guide, the Scrum team is accountable for creating a valuable, useful increment every sprint. Nowhere does it say in the manifesto, nowhere does it say in Scrum anything about prototyping. Of course, that's a weak way to argue that prototyping is not Agile, right? My point is, why do we not mention prototyping? Why did the people who wrote the manifesto, why did the people who wrote the Scrum guide, why didn't they mention prototyping? It's so obviously in line with the goals of Agile, with the goals of rapid learning, rapid feedback. Prototyping is the poster child of rapid feedback. Why is it not in the manifesto? So this is what I believe. This is my interpretation. Prototyping gives you very superficial feedback. Prototyping, we build part complete products. We build fake products, artificial products, mock-ups. The feedback that we get from these products is only minimal value. Prototyping is very quick. It's definitely a strength. But the quality of the feedback, the quality of the learning, and the breadth of learning is very limited. The reason I think that prototyping is so popular still is because we don't recognize the trade-off that we're making. When we prototype, if we spend more time building a prototype, more time on the design, we delay the build. And the build is what we are actually looking for in Agile, in Scrum. The build is the thing that gives us a significant depth of learning. It gives us quality learning. So by prototyping, we're delaying that. We're delaying our learning. Let's just contrast that with what is recommended in the manifesto, product increments. So the team works together to build a complete product. The team works through the entire process. They work through the design, the build, the deployment, the release, and they can show a real product to a real user who can give real feedback, who can interact in a realistic way. When we build a product increment, we have end-to-end learning. We learn about every step of the process. We learn how to collaborate together. We learn how to actually build the product, which may have an impact on how we design the product. We learn which tools and technologies are useful to us. So my suggestion today is that building a complete increment has significantly more value than building a prototype. And that the damage done by delaying that build is potentially more significant than the value we gain from building a prototype. Okay, so to summarize chapter 3, Agile already has a learning process, and that process is called working software or working product or product increment. But if you remember on the first slide I showed you that we could have design thinking, lean startup, and Agile work together. So why not have prototyping and product increments? Why not benefit from both? Why not prototype and then build and gain twice? Why not learn twice? At this part of the talk, I'm going to step well out of my comfort zone. I'm going to be as transparent as I can. I'll tell you what I think, but please do come and talk to me later if you can help me learn beyond that. So just a quick recap. Our goals are the fastest path to learning and the most learning. So breadth of learning, depth of learning, and minimize the wasted effort. So let's come back to these diagrams. I'm sure you've seen them before. Here's there are many of these. So here's an example of design thinking, lean startup, agile. Here's an example of design thinking and agile, kind of tick-tocking back and forth. And here's an example with Foresight, design thinking, and agile. And I will admit, I don't even know what Foresight is, but maybe I should learn about it. So how does this work? What do they mean? What do these diagrams tell us? Apparently that's not this slide, that's the next slide. A key idea in the Agile Manifesto is sustainable development. So once we start a project, the business will continue. Businesses don't just start and stop at the beginning and end of projects. Businesses are continuous. And another idea in Agile is that we have a sustainable development process. So we can keep building, keep extending, keep providing value. Second idea is that we're supposed to have continuous contact between the business team and the product development team. Okay, so let's try and dig into, oh, sorry, I've got a third one. So a similar idea, this is from the latest Scrum guide, from November Scrum guide. So in the Scrum guide, it says that all activities should be managed by the team and that should be done including experimentation and R&D. So this is a new addition to the Scrum guide just last month. And the Scrum guide also says no sub-teams, focus on one objective. Okay, so that's the background to how we're going to dig through this now. I'm going to make 3 attempts to try to explain the diagram I showed you. So we have the diagram in the top right corner. The first attempt is a very naive attempt. We seem to have a flow going from left to right. Your first interpretation might be that these are phases in your business. So maybe you're a startup and you're going to start by doing some design thinking, and then you're going to do lean startup, and eventually you're going to grow your business and become an agile team. The problem with this is it's not a sustainable process. It's a process that starts at some point and stops at some point. Or it's a process that becomes agile and only agile. So we lose the design thinking, we lose the lean startup. If that's the case, then it's not sustainable. If that's the case, then essentially it's a waterfall process. I think I'm probably talking to the converted. You're at an Agile conference. I don't need to explain to you that delaying product development whilst we do a huge amount of planning and design is probably a bad idea. So let's cross this one off. Let's assume this is not a good way to go. And this will cover approaches like design sprints, sprint zero. I call this prefixing. I talk about this meaning we take a process and we stick another process in front of it. And we don't want to stick another process in front of Agile. I'll quickly mention, so design sprint doesn't need to be a prefixed activity. It could be, you could go between normal sprints and design sprints and back. But either way, it's a non-sustainable activity. Your business life cycle should be something that continues all the time, and you should be able to incorporate your design work into that sprint. Okay, so let's try a second attempt. So my second interpretation is that all 3 of these circles are continuous processes working concurrently. So at any moment in time, we have some of the team is doing design thinking, some of the team is doing experiments, lean startup, some of the team is doing agile. But that means that for each feature, so if you think at the feature perspective, not the team perspective, then each feature has to navigate all the way through design thinking, all the way through lean startup, and all the way through product development. So each feature has a very long lead time before you learn about it. That's not a good thing. Secondly, you end up in a situation where part of your team is doing design, and the other part of your team is building the features that the design team designed last sprint. So you're splitting your features over multiple sprints. Again, the lead time is long. The time until you learn is long. And it also has the effect of splitting your team. You're creating sub-teams. You're creating a team that's working on design and a different team that is working on development, that's working 1 month or one sprint behind your design team. For simplicity, I've just got kind of 2 interleaved steps. But if you had separate user research, design, build, test, deploy, you could imagine that this becomes, again, kind of an interleaved waterfall. So a set of waterfalls, one after the other. Okay, so this is often called sprint ahead. So sprint ahead is the idea where your design team is 1 sprint ahead of your development team, or maybe 2 sprints, 3 sprints ahead. So I'm going to go to interpretation 3. And this is the interpretation that I think could actually work. It's essentially the same as the previous, except that each of those circles, instead of being 1 sprint or 1 week, they're now much smaller. So each circle represents perhaps a day. And in this case, each PBI, each feature is working its way from left to right within part of a sprint. So each sprint, you have many features going all the way through this process. To do this, your features need to be very small. Your PBIs need to be very small. And we end up with a situation where we have lots and lots of little waterfalls, but essentially that is what Agile is, right? Agile will always have different disciplines working in somewhat of a sequence. But once you get to the stage where each feature is very small, then each sprint is delivering many features. Each feature is providing feedback quickly, and your lead time on learning is much smaller. And your team is working together, because in 1 sprint, all of your team, all your designers, your developers, your QA, they're all working on the same features in the same sprint. Okay, so just to mention that the latest update of the Scrum Guide somewhat supports this idea that multiple increments within a sprint is something you might consider doing. So, TLDR for this section, prefixing is bad. We don't want to take our Agile process and add another process in front of it. Because anything we put in front of Agile is delaying learning. Agile already has a learning process. Agile has a very strong learning process. You follow your entire development process every sprint, and you learn from every part of it every sprint. Of course, also, sub-teams are bad. By prefixing, you are pulling your teams apart, so they're working at different times, and they're becoming different teams. Okay, so to summarize what I'm trying to say today, product delivery, creating product increments is a learning-rich activity. Try to avoid sprint ahead. Try to avoid letting your designers run away from your developers. I know this may be not practical or possible in larger organizations, but try to make the lead time from design to deploy shorter so that you learn quicker. A tool that you can use to help you is thin vertical PBIs. So try to take your PBIs and make them as small as you can. But at the same time, make sure that each PBI is a complete feature so that at the end you can test it and you can learn from it. I'm just going to mention quickly Mike Cohen's technique called Spider. This is quite a good approach for splitting PBIs into smaller pieces. So in particular, I'm gonna have to guess what the letters are. I think P is paths. So if you can take a process and split it into separate steps, separate sub-processes, you can develop each sub-process as a separate PBI. And I know R is also important, but I can't for the life of me remember what R is. So I recommend using Spider to create your thin vertical PBIs. Next, make sure that you're one team. Don't let your design side and your development side work different processes and work at different times. It's really important for your developers to understand your designers and for your design process to have a voice from the development side. Likewise, it's important for your developers to understand QA and for them to support QA. And the last comment is consider using Kanban. So again, I'm going to step out my comfort zone here, but my interpretation of Kanban is that it's a more continuous pull flow. This will help to reduce the cutoff between different sprints. So when you have a piece of design work at the end of a sprint that's developed in the next sprint, this is a slight issue in Scrum, but it's not an issue in Kanban because you have a continuous process. So I think Kanban might be a viable option to, let's see. Kanban helps you to be more sustainable, helps you to be more continual and perpetual. Okay, that's everything I have for you today. Like I said, I'm stepping way out of my comfort zone talking about this topic. So if you're more experienced than me on these areas, please come and talk to me. Teach me what I've done wrong. Teach me how you're working in your teams. If you want to know more, just come and chat to me as well. And if you feel like scanning this QR code, it's just my contact details. So it's my Medium and my GitHub and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Charles.
Charles. So now, any question from the floor?
Yes. So interesting for your topic about prototype. It's like a blend the prototype into the Agile and Scrum group.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that probably every professional team is prototyping in some way. At least with my loose definition, where mockups count as prototypes. I think this may sound very strange, but I'm asking you to consider doing less prototyping and more quickly delivering the product, because the learning you get from a mockup is very, very slim, and the learning you get from product increment is much deeper, much more valuable.
Okay.
And I'm not saying don't do design work, I'm just saying that should be in the sprint. It should be part of your team's process within a sprint. It shouldn't be a separate activity.
Okay, thank you. Any question?
Actually, I have a really long discuss about this because what you share is really good, and we trap on as a sub team. So I would like to know, like, because right now what we do, we do like what you mentioned is about the sub team, right? We have like design team to work ahead for like at least 1 or 2 sprints, and the delivery team producing follow them, right? So I want you to give more how we make it in one sprint.
So I think my main disclaimer is that I'm speaking to you from a position of working on very small teams. So my advice is clearly controversial and maybe not practical for larger teams. I think the major tool that you have is thin PBIs. So I think the major lever you have to achieve this is make all of your features smaller. Obviously, don't just squeeze them, like cut them into many pieces, right? And I think the trouble you will have there is that incremental development is very easy, very natural, but incremental design is perhaps much less natural. I'm not a designer. I should have mentioned the next talk in this room is UX in Agile. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from that, how that could work.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Wait a minute.
Please wait for.
So I know you already mentioned that maybe in terms of UX designing, that doing it in incrementally might not be the most intuitive way to do so. How about designing in terms of architecture or a more technical aspect of it? I think that's one part that our team is also struggling. I know we could deliver incrementally, but how about the whole architecture, the whole building aspect of it?
So for the last couple of years, the development work that I've done has been what I would call UI-driven development, where first I design the screen and I only do the architecture that's needed for that one screen. So I don't add any infrastructure at all, or I don't put any architecture work in for things that I don't need yet on the UI. So it's a very lean approach where you're quite strict. You might think you know what you need in advance, but you don't let yourself build it. If there's a field on the screen, you put the field in the database, you put the field in your models and so on. If it's not on the UI, you don't do it. And I think that helps a lot. It's a very much incremental approach to architecture. I think the other thing is that, I mean, it depends how big your team is on one product. If you can have your team working as independently as possible, so they're not stepping in the same areas, that helps. But at some point it is a problem, yes. Yeah, I guess my answer is I try as much as I can to avoid upfront architecture. And again, I'm in a kind of privileged position where I can do that. I'm working in small teams. But if you're working in much bigger teams, perhaps that's not viable. Maybe someone else in here has the experience to answer that for you.
Yeah, so you can take the QR code for the community, discuss with about what you are hiring also, right?
Yeah, I should mention there's almost nothing there today, but it's basically an empty blog. But if you do want to get in contact, please scan it, and I plan to start interacting a lot more with the community. So
Okay.
I mean, today's the beginning of that.
Wow.
I see.
That's good. Okay.
Is there? I believe we have time for one
Yeah,
more question.
One
if
other
you
question.
Have. Okay.
Okay.
Hi. From what I understand from you guys says is that like in order to achieve the less overhead, is that we try to separate the development increment into smaller, and it's same goal for the design wise. My problem is that like let's say for example like we build a software and our UX team is try to design the UX and the UI. The problem is that because like UX is thinking about the overall flow, like from here to there and stuff like that. So it turned out like every time that we're doing this, it's kind of like a really, really big one, and it's pretty hard like to separate it into the small scale to fit in a very small amount, like 1 or 2 day implementation before we go back to like the design sprint again. So any suggestion into this issue?
I have one very controversial suggestion. So I'm absolutely not saying that I'm correct here, but my suggestion is to move your design team so that they are working within the sprint and to start working incrementally. So my answer is, and again, I don't know if this is going to work, I don't know if it's correct, but my suggestion today is stop doing so much upfront design, stop designing these huge features, get your designers to work more closely with your developers, get them to be building almost piece by piece, flow by flow, screen by screen, have the developer get involved sooner. Because, again, my experience, no matter how much design we do up front, when I build it, it never works. The flow is always wrong. There's always missing buttons. There's things that don't work, right? There's process problems. And to me, that's waste. You've put a lot of time into the planning. So my suggestion today is, let's stop doing that. Let's start having designers work in smaller increments. And don't be afraid to iterate, I think is probably the idea here. I think that people they have the mindset that my UX should produce a perfect scenario in one go. Developers don't work like this already. Developers have a very iterative approach. So my suggestion, again, not a UX expert, but my suggestion is get your designers to be more iterative as well. Get them to do a little bit, have the developer start working on it, get feedback on it, make sure it actually works, make sure that the flow is needed. And I think you will save effort by doing that. So I appreciate what I'm asking is strange, it's new, and also I have almost no design experience to back it up, but that's what I'm bringing today, and that's what I'm asking to discuss with the rest of you. From my perspective, from the development side, this could be a valuable way to work. So I open up the discussion. People from the UX side maybe have a go, or tell me why it won't work for you. Tell me more so I can understand more.
Yeah, so that's the theme. Let's experiment together. Right? Let's learning together. Yeah, and also you can give feedback for Xiao by scanning the QR code. And thank you for your approach. Very interesting. We have a little gift for you.
Yes, and I would like to invite our pretty Ile. Thank you, Mr. Charles.